The value of every sat that you stack is much more than you think. And I'm not in this video talking about how I believe the purchasing power of Bitcoin or sats is going to increase. That is not what I am referring to. When I say the value of every sat is much more than you think, I'm referring to personal finance. So this is going to be a Bitcoin personal finance episode. So what do I mean when I say the value of every sat that you stack is much more than you think? Let's look at what happens when you work and earn an income and then convert some of that income into Bitcoin. You save it. So the first thing to point out is that no one earns an income and is capable of converting 100% of it into savings. Look at your personal financial situation from the perspective of a business. There is upkeep. There is expenses. All revenue that goes into a business is not profit. Your gross income is equivalent to a business's revenue. It is not your net income. Just as revenue is not profit. Because first, we have to subtract expenses. So, viewing your life as kind of a business operation with upkeep and expenses, what does this look like? What is the bottom line of your personal financial situation viewed from this perspective? Well, first of all, you have taxes. So, for every dollar you earn, you are paying, depending on your jurisdiction, anywhere from, 15 cents to 50 cents in taxes. It's a wide range, but a good chunk of your gross income is going to be taken right off the bat from taxes. And then what do we have? We have your housing, rent or a mortgage. There goes another significant chunk. If you have a vehicle or just in general transportation, it is wise to keep this budget category as low as possible because transportation costs can absolutely destroy your ability to save if they are not reined in. More people have traded the ability to achieve financial independence for the luxury of having a nice vehicle. More people have done that. It's millions of people trade freedom for a nice vehicle. Don't go down that path. But that's another story. So you have to pay for transportation. Well, at this point, half your income is already gone. Half your gross is already gone, at least. Maybe at this point we're already at 2/3 of your income, depending on if you're the working class or if you're a high-paid professional. But the point is, we haven't even finished all your budget line items, and we're already roughly about half of your income's gone. Now you have groceries, you have consumable supplies, durable goods, you have insurance premiums, vet bills, medical expenses, pharmacy. These are all budget line items that just chip away at that gross revenue, that income, that gross income. This is all chipping away at your profit. And by profit, I mean your savings. And by savings, I mean your ability to stack sats. So every dollar that you earn, it's all being claimed by all these expenses, these life expenses, the upkeep of life. Just as a business has expenses and overhead, so does life. And of course, the analogy of comparing your personal budget to a business is not. It begins to break down when you consider that we are humans. We are not soulless corporations, and humans have desires. Humans want to spend on pleasure. Humans want to go on vacation. We want to invest in our education. We want to invest in things that enrich us. We have recreational activities that we have to account for. We cannot just ignore these expenses. We cannot just ignore our immediate desires. Now, we have to make sure that those desires do not take over and do not destroy our ability to save. But we are also not robots who can just cut expenses down to the bare bone and just have no budget for pleasure, no budget for personal enrichment, no budget for recreation. So these budget line items have to be taken into consideration as well. Now there has to be discipline, there has to be a sense of self-control and whatnot, but we have to consider these expenses as well. And now, what are we looking at? After tax and mortgage or rent and insurance and transportation and groceries and consumables and a budget for pleasure, after all of these things and more that I have not even mentioned, what about giving? What about a budget for gifts? What about charity? What about patronage? The expenses that are incurred for every dollar that you earn, it really starts to eat up much of that dollar. So what are we looking at now? Depending on what your income is and how you are able to minimize the expenses, the overhead of your life, maybe you only have 10 cents for every dollar left over after all is said and done. If you have a higher income and or you are able to have a very bare bones budget and keep expenses down, maybe you are able to have 30 cents for every dollar. If you're very fortunate and you're a professional with a 6-figure income, maybe 50 cents for every dollar. Maybe. But the point is, a good, considerable portion of every dollar that you earn is eaten up, is gone. You cannot save it. All that is left over in the end is what you are able to save. And for some people, that is as little as 10 cents per dollar. Hopefully more, but if you're low income, it may be that you have to work for every 10 cents that you save, you have to earn $1. And that's pretty sobering. How does this relate to Bitcoin? Why do I say that the value of every sat that you save is much more than you think? Well, the reason for that is that for every sat that you save, you had to work for multiples of that sat just to maintain the upkeep of life. Right? Potentially for every sat that you saved, maybe you had to earn 9 sats just to generate that 1 sat of savings. If you're more fortunate, perhaps for every 3 sats that you save, you had to earn 10. And 7 of them were burned just from the upkeep of life. You see what I'm getting at here is your savings is more precious than you think, because For every sat that is saved, it required that much more energy just to generate them. Just as for every dollar of profit, it required multiples of that dollar in revenue just to generate the dollar of profit. There's companies that have 1% profit margins. That means that with the low margin businesses like this, for every dollar in revenue, they're making a penny in profit. Think of grocery stores or gas stations. Their profit margins are so low that they are generating a dollar of profit for every $100 of revenue. They have to have $100 of revenue just for that one single dollar of profit. And it's this exact same dynamic with your savings. Now, hopefully, you have better profit margins than that. Hopefully, you have a larger savings than 1%. The sort of traditional rule of thumb in the realm of personal finance has been save 10% of your income. While that's a bare minimum, I think that 10% rule of thumb is a relic of a bygone era, a relic of an era when factory workers in America were a single family was able to live off one income, and there was a defined benefit pension plan at the end of that 25-year career at the factory. That's gone. In a lot of ways, it's more every man for himself now. The social safety nets that have been established in the past are we see them breaking down. It no longer is sufficient to just save 10% of your income. You need to be as much as possible. I recognize that for some people who have lower incomes, it's really tough to get past that 10%. But I really need to emphasize, you need to be saving much more than 10% of your income, if possible. You need to strive for that. So the value of every sat that you stack is it's a multiple of that sat, because you had to generate multiples of multiple sats just to save the one. And the value is compounded even further when you consider that this is a precious personal treasury, in the sense that you cannot rely upon traditional safety nets to provide for you in the future. This is the precious nature of your savings. You need to really intensely value every single sat that you stack, because it's so difficult to generate savings. It's deceptive. One sat is not really one sat. $1 is not really $1 in savings. Let's say you're truly fortunate and you have one Bitcoin. You're a whole coiner. Well, do not look at that one Bitcoin that you own as being worth whatever the dollar value of Bitcoin is at any given time. Oh no, you can't look at it that way, because right now, for example, Bitcoin is worth the gross salary of a quite well-paying job. $60,000, $65,000 US. That's a pretty good salary. And here's the thing, though. It is worth much more than that, because if you earn $60,000, you're not keeping all of that money. Not even close. So you cannot just buy a Bitcoin with a year's salary, because that year's salary requires you to pay tax on it, requires you to have housing and transportation, and you have to fuel yourself with calories. You do not keep that $60,000. A single Bitcoin that you own now cannot be replaced by 1 year's worth of income if you earn $60,000 a year. No. Potentially, depending on what your expenses are, perhaps one Bitcoin that you own now would require, who knows, maybe $250,000 of income. So if you own one Bitcoin right now, it may well be the case that you would have to earn $250,000 just to be able to buy that one Bitcoin. You see what I'm getting at here? The value of a sat, the value of a Bitcoin is much more than its nominal price. Because you have to think in terms of the bottom line. You have to think in terms of, what do I have to generate in terms of value in the world in order to earn a profit that I store in Bitcoin? That's the way you have to look at it. Look at it from the bottom line. Your gross income is not the equivalent to your net income. And in that sense, every sat that you save is worth much more than the nominal value of it would suggest. One sat is not one sat. One sat, depending on your circumstances, might actually be like 10 sats. You might have to generate 10 sats in value, provide that into the world, and then after all your expenses, you're left with that one precious sat. So the value of a sat is much more than you think. And your Bitcoin, whatever you have managed to save up to this point, is so much more valuable than you may think at face value. It doesn't take long in Bitcoin, the way the purchasing power of your savings compounds and grows exponentially with Bitcoin. It doesn't take long to reach a point where the Bitcoin that you own is totally irreplaceable. I know for myself, the Bitcoin that I've accumulated since 2018 is impossible for me to ever accumulate again. For two reasons. One, because since 2018, the price of Bitcoin has gone up so much that I would now have to work, well, let's just say for many, many, many years, just to for my savings to be able to replace that Bitcoin at the current Bitcoin price. But here's the thing. In those years that I would be working, scrimping and saving and dollar cost averaging back into attempting to reestablish what my current Bitcoin position is, in those years, Bitcoin's price is not static. It is rising exponentially. So in the time that it would take me to replace the fiat value of my Bitcoin that I currently own, in the time that it would take to accumulate that amount of fiat, the price of Bitcoin will be who knows what. Not the current price. Probably much higher. And in that sense, the Bitcoin that you accumulate now, it really does, it doesn't take long for it to be just totally irreplaceable. That's why I say the Bitcoin that you accumulate now, in 10 years when you look back, it is probably going to be 90, maybe even 99% of the Bitcoin that you will ever own. The value of every sat that you stack is utterly precious from this perspective. It is even more precious than would appear at face value.